All right, we are live.
All right. Good evening, everybody. Let me arrange my screen a little bit before we get started, and excited to have everybody on. And it's been a while since I myself have done a webinar. So if I'm a little rusty, um, bear with me. But I'm excited to share more about what we're learning about the college admissions landscape, and including trends that we're seeing from this past cycle. And actually, I think the greater bracket of time is really from 2020 to now. And so I think there's a lot of interesting things to share. Excited to do so. If you would be so kind as to go on to the comment section or the chat section and share with us where you are calling in from. And we are always excited to have people from all over the U.S. Granted, it is 10 p.m. East Coast time, so appreciate our East Coasters who are joining in with us. But go ahead and please share and tell us where Tampa, Florida. Love it. Fantastic. Morristown, New Jersey. So especially East Coast friends who are joining in with us. Allie from Hong Kong. Wow, that's fantastic. What do you think about that, Anthony?
I don't know what time it is.
It's,
It's super early, right?
hopefully it's okay. So excited to have everybody from everywhere. Fairfax, Virginia, Sunnyvale, California, all over the place. So super excited to have everybody join in with us. And I want to do a quick intro of my partner in crime, Anthony Sue, who is our operations manager and just an all-around good guy. Anthony, you may have met him if you've joined in on a free consultation, and Anthony's going to jump back in with us when we do our Q&A time at the end. So I just want all of you to get a good look of Anthony, and and then Anthony will jump off and then jump back on when it's time to do some Q&A.
Sounds good.
So
And
yeah.
just to let everyone know, yeah, there's the Q&A box. Feel free to use chat as well. You can put your questions there. If there's anything super urgent, I'll let Elton know, but otherwise we'll save it all for the end to do Q&A. We'll probably save like 15, 20 minutes to go over some of the questions. So,
Hmm. Absolutely. So I actually I think just for ease, I'd encourage you to use the Q&A box so that Anthony's not maybe not chasing questions in the chat. So the Q&A box is ready for you at any time. Go ahead and post there. And I will do my best to try to give as much time at the end to cover questions. And I know there's gonna be a lot of specific questions, a lot of particulars as it relates to your child's college admissions journey. And so happy to get to as many of those as possible. And again, once again, super excited to have everybody from all over the world join us for our college admissions trends for 2024 webinar today. All right, let's get started. So let me do a quick intro of myself. My name is Elton Lin. I'm the CEO and founder of Illumin Education. I've been doing private college advising for actually almost 13 years, and started Illumin Education in 2014. So we were celebrating our 10-year anniversary. So super excited. Anthony, we should do something for our 10-year anniversary. But with that being said, we've worked with a lot of students over the years, have had students admitted to every top 50 school, including every Ivy League. We work with about a little bit over 300 students per year, submit almost 2,000 apps per year. So we see a lot of results um, just within our small grouping of students. And so not only that, we're tapped into a national network of college advisors who are both sharing insights and results and better understanding what the landscape is looking like. So we see quite a bit, and happy to share all of our learnings and do the best that we can to help you be as prepared as possible. Let me share a little bit about what we're going to do today. Number one, I'm going to share some of the most critical trends for the forthcoming 2024-25 admissions cycle. I'm going to share a little bit about how to respond to those trends and a few student examples interspersed in between. And then we're going to do some Q&A, but I want to maybe get started with my own, just my own college journey, because my sense is that as we kind of go into a lot of the data and information today, there is, my sense, going to be a feeling that like you need to get everything right. And I just want to share with you, and especially because mindful that I have my cousin who's joining us too, so he may know the story. But when I started college at UC Davis when I was in 1991, and was a civil engineering major. And then just did not know. I'm not sure whether I really made the right major choice even at that time. As you can probably imagine, I'm not doing civil engineering currently, to the remiss of my family. And and then didn't know. I mean, my one of UC Davis was really one of the only options I had to attend university, and so probably didn't apply to enough schools. Probably didn't apply to the right major. And then by the time I got to my second quarter at UC Davis, I was on academic probation. So I was um, all C's and a D in multivariable calculus. And I remember the UC Davis sending a letter home to my parents. And my mom opened up the letter saying that I was on academic probation, and she cried. And I remember that moment very vividly. And no one likes to break their mother's heart. And it was really a little bit of a wake-up call for me. And I forthcoming got my act together and got my GPA back up and worked a lot harder. But I often find, especially being a college advisor, that I love the details. I'm into the data. I love the trends. But there is like room to veer off course, and there is room to make mistakes. And I, without hesitation, don't regret being an engineering major, even though I'm not an engineer currently. I mean, being an engineering major taught me how to study, and it taught me how to take my education more seriously. I loved UC Davis, even though I don't know what other choices I would have had, and it was an extremely formative time. And so with that being said, a lot of life is really about, yeah, learning to manage the ups and downs, and oftentimes learning to deal with mistakes and things that veer off course. And so part of this journey is learning how to do that. And so I have seen a lot of students have a ton of confidence in their resilience. And as I talk with more students and work with more students, I'm even like I'm always very encouraged and impressed by the resilience, capability, and just ability to recover, that that ability that students have. And that's part of their growth as well. And it was a major part of my growth. So as we get into this data, as we get into all the trends, and this feeling of kind of being able to needing to be able to get everything right, let me remind you that it's like gonna be okay, and there is room to veer off track, and there is room to recover, and there is room to make mistakes. But with that being said, I absolutely want to equip you to the best that I can, share what insights we have, and let's get on with it, shall we? So, all right. What are some current trends in college admissions today? So I'm going to share three tonight, and we'll dig into the first one right now. The first one is that applications are up in number, total number. And so this is where it's, I mean, I feel like that's neither here nor there. I feel like you probably understand where that's coming from already. But just to kind of give you a sense of where that is going, there's been almost a 30% increase since 2020. In particular, a 10% increase in public schools over a 5% increase in private schools. And there is 81% of that total increase is largely towards schools that have like around a 50 to 60 to 70% avid rate. And so you can essentially make some inferences, and I'll come to that in a moment of why that is. But that's where that number is coming from. Maybe to give you a quick glimpse, applications are up, which invariably means admit rates are down because if the pool is going up and the same amount of spaces are there, or the number of spaces aren't growing with the pool, then the admit rate is going to go down. So you can get a glimpse of here. Harvard has become extremely impossible to extremely impossible, and then you can kind of maybe skim your way down this chart. But let me kind of highlight the bottom half here. And in particular, like a school like NYU, and this is where even working in college advising for 10 plus years, even, I can remember a day when NYU was a safety target for a lot of students. And seeing NYU become a single digit admit rate, seeing USC become a single digit admit rate, to me almost is kind of it's crazy, to be frank, And so the NYUs, the UCLAs, the USCs, and let me also highlight specifically the University of Washington, UT Austin, what we would consider flagship public schools that oftentimes maybe a top third applicant from a particular state might assume that they have access to their flagship public school, and the admit rates for these schools are dropping like rocks as well, unfortunately. And so let me look through. So why is this the case? And maybe firstly, number one is well, let me justify this and maybe put some context to it is that the majority of the increase in number of applications and maybe new applicants is coming from minorities and underrepresented students. Now, this is not necessarily a long conversation about the Supreme Court decision about affirmative action, but for some reason, and we can get into this another time, but once the Supreme Court decided to withdraw affirmative action, there was a spike in number of minorities and underrepresented students applying in school. And so we can, get into that another time, but a good number of those new students were minorities and underrep students. The average number of apps submitted increased up to 7 apps per student. And our students, to be frank with you, I mean, our students are often submitting anywhere between 10 to 13 applications, with one of those applications being the University of California application. So our students are getting anywhere between 15 to 18 results. So students, generally speaking, are applying to more schools. And the response, the motivation is because it's just so much harder to get into the top schools that I just don't feel safe and I have to apply to more schools. And they're submitting more applications. And a lot of this growth is going towards in-state publics. So this is also being in California. A lot of our students are applying into the UC system, but whether you're in New York applying to SUNY schools or UT and Texas applying to more UT schools, more of the growth is going towards in-state publics and trying to cover your bases with regards to like making sure you get into a good school. And certainly there's been a rise of the sort of rise of college post-pandemic. So to where from 2020 to 2022, students were not going out of state as much, maybe more. There was a drop off in the number of students who were just in total going to college. That recovery has come back, and there are more and more students who are sort of making their way towards a normal application cycle. So what does this mean? Target schools are now reaches, which, going back to what I was mentioning about the NYU, USC, University of Washington, those schools, which some students were considering as target schools, they're just no longer target schools, and you have to treat them as reaches. You cannot always count on your safety schools. And I don't have planned to talk about sort of yield protection, but maybe some of you have heard of it about this topic of there's a lot of safety schools that are not admitting students because they in some sense may be overqualified, or there's enough data to show that that student is unlikely to come. And so you cannot always count on your safety schools, and you cannot always count on top in-state public schools. And so it's just making the entire college list generation process very unstable and uncertain. And the only thing that students do in response to this is just apply to more schools, which is only kind of fueling the instability, unfortunately. And so, but this is unfortunately the case right now. But but then what do you do? What do we do in response to all this that is happening? Certainly, you can consider applying to more safety schools. And I mean, I'm not talking about, applying to. There's only a certain number of schools you can apply to on one Common App account, but including a few more safety schools in your list to make sure that you have covered your bases and then also maybe secondly, doing research on more colleges. And I always often find that many students, families, parents really only have like 7 colleges in their head, and they want to go to those 7 colleges. And then certainly some of those are Ivy League schools, but there are plenty of amazing universities out there. And it's good to do some research and better understand what your options are. And then thirdly is to apply to both public and private schools, and private schools that are likely in your safety, maybe more likely target range. Because the truth is that privates are more able to provide scholarship funding to reduce cost. And I think oftentimes parents come in and there is this feeling that if I don't get into a Harvard or a Stanford, then I'm just going to go to my in-state public school and keep costs down. And the reality is that the in-state public schools are becoming more uncertain and unstable with regards to their admissions predictive behavior. But then secondly, private schools, especially those that maybe where you're more in a safer range, are more able to use money to try to attract you to come. So I mean, I have a student maybe a couple years back who was like admitted to like UC Santa Cruz, UC Riverside, but was given around almost 20,000 to go to Occidental, which is a liberal arts college in Los Angeles. And their goal is pre-med, life science, biology, and Occidental actually has a very strong medical school matriculation rate. So a high percentage of Oxy students who apply to med school end up getting admitted and going. And so if I'm considering 20,000 from Oxy, which brings it closer to what a normal UC and state public school total cost would be. And my options were like Occidental versus UC Santa Cruz. I mean, I would heavily consider Occidental because you're getting a public school education. I'm sorry, private school education for close to the same price as you would, with a public UC. So this is where I'm always encouraging families apply to both publics and privates, especially safety likely target private schools, and compare the offers at the end, and then see where you have at and make your decision later. Don't sort of be so closed off about just only applying to top schools and then your in-state publics. All right, second trend we have going on is college major does matter. So your college major matters. And so let me share a little bit of data with you. This is coming specifically from Department of Education, National Center for Statistics. And if you just do a quick scan of this screen, it's very obvious that your STEM majors are like dominate this table, dominate the number of degrees being conferred in 2022. So, whether it's bio, health professions, business, computer science, 108,000, which for what it's worth, whether it seems low or seems high, I mean, so I'll show you from the next slide, but STEM majors dominate. And to show you some 10-year difference from 2012 to 2022, you can see the growth of bio, business, engineering, health professions, psychology. Then you can see the growth from computer science and all the kind of like the derivative computer science programs. It's more than double. And you can see the decline in social science and history, English language, foreign languages. And you can already kind of get a sense that if you're just applying into computer science and related majors similar to computer science, it's going to be a little bit dicey. And so maybe to share with you a couple other bits from Glassdoor and Indeed, top majors based on salary, most in-demand majors. It's very much painting a very similar picture with regards to STEM, math, science, health, nursing in particular. Nursing is never going out of style, so I think it's great, by the way. But you can kind of get a sense of where these lists are going. And what does this mean? It means that the in-demand majors are going to be more selective. And where that's going to lead to is that the choice of major may make a college a reach, where prior to that you may think it's a target, but choosing a particular major will make that college a reach. And so I'll kind of get into some data to be specific, but strong grades with many APs is not enough. Resumes need to support your interest in higher demand majors. Our team was at the UC counselor conference last fall, and and they were actually the UC counselors were trying to convince the UC admissions people were trying to convince counselors to dissuade students who are not committed, who are not really clearly demonstrating their interest in applying to computer science, to not apply to computer science, right? So I think this is where when you think about the total influx of students who are applying to computer science, especially for the more selective majors, computer science, bio, business, etc., your resume really needs to support it because there's just too many students, too few spots. Maybe a quick case study on UC Santa Barbara. Overall acceptance rate of 26%. I think this is actually 2023, so probably, a hair lower for this coming year. 90 majors, 125,000 applicants. 10,000 applied to computer science. 8,000 of those 10,000 had 4.0s, or a 4.0 UC GPA or higher. And only 800 were admitted into the CS program. So which makes the computer science admit rate, effective admit rate of 6.4% as compared to a 26% admit rate for the entire school. And so choosing computer science is already sort of putting you into a spot, if you will. And maybe to kind of give you another quick data chart here. CS admit rates for the broad University of California campuses. For a UC Berkeley, you're talking about a 2.9%. A UC Irvine at an almost 6. I mean, it may be encouraging that a UC Riverside and a UC Santa Cruz is 36 and 60%, but this is 2022, and there's no doubt. When I have an intern who is actually at UC Santa Cruz, who's a computer science major. And she got in 2021, like super fortunate. She's super glad she got into Santa Cruz in 2021 because they're limiting the students who are not within the major to take computer science classes at UC Santa Cruz. And so there's already impaction happening at UC Santa Cruz, and invariably that admit rate is now 60% now. But with that being said, this is it's tougher and tougher. If you're selecting a more selective major, and in this case, I'm using CS as an example. So what do I do? So what are some suggestions on how to approach this? I think first things, excuse me, first things first, I mean, you can certainly consider other majors. And this is where there are more and more schools that are considering, that are sort of branching off other majors that may be related. And I'll give you some examples of what those majors are. There's applied math, there is cognitive science, there is data science, there's other things going on. But this also may be to where if you actually genuinely have other interests, it may be a good opportunity to explore those other interests. And in so doing, if you really want to, say, do computer science or do some other major, you can always minor or double major once you get there. And so, but one idea in order to sort of like, maybe not escape the kind of 4.6% versus the 6.4 versus the 26% is to consider other majors. Apply to more targeted safety schools, which is perhaps maybe one of the enduring, like suggestions for this presentation today. And then maybe thirdly is to build a resume that clearly communicates the student's interest in that major. And so again, considering the fact that there are a lot of students applying, um, wanting to make sure that the student is ready for that particular major, and committed to studying that particular area can only really be figured out by what you do outside of class. Certainly, it can be ascertained by the classes you take, but it needs to be supported by a resume that is strongly in the direction of that particular major. So build a resume that clearly communicates the student's interest in major. So let me give you a couple of alternative majors. This is not an exhaustive list. There's more that we can discuss, certainly. But for computer science, there's applied math. You can certainly do, as I alluded to before, a humanities major with a CS minor. So I think that's, actually probably assuming that your interests are genuinely headed towards the humanities, then considering that route, I think is a good preparation for the future, to be frank. Business analytics, cybersecurity, statistics, cognitive science, which is a combination of psychology, linguistics, and computer science, which essentially are the fundamental disciplines of machine learning, human-computer interaction, and a lot of what's happening on the technology development scope for the coming decade. Biology, there's a couple of different majors here. Business can be a lot of different things as well. And I just want to kind of point out this bottom note because I find that I end up saying this quite a bit, but pre-med students who are intending to apply to med school after their undergraduate degree is done do not need to be science majors. I have a student who was a music major at University of Michigan. Certainly because he's interested in music and is a violin performer, but opted to apply into med school. Just took a small host of science courses to prepare for the MCAT, and he's going through the application process right now as we speak. And the reality is that you don't need to be a science major. You can be any number of majors. And in fact, there is a bit of a preference or looking out for other students who have different backgrounds in the scope of a med school application process. So you're not at a disadvantage if you are not a science major when applying to med school. So maybe a couple other items. If you're an electrical or mechanical engineer, there's some engineering options. Neuroscience and psychology, which is getting exceedingly popular right now in light of technology that is going in that direction. There's some different majors. So these are some alternatives, and happy for you to take a picture of it. All right. Um, Maybe something else to point out that we have been seeing more of over the course of the past 3 or 4 years are like CS plus majors that are popping up at different universities. Northeastern is one, but the most pronounced one is the CSX majors, or CS plus other major programs that are at University of Illinois. So we see this as a trend happening across different universities across the United States. And if you look at the specific admin rates for computer science programs at UIUC, University of Illinois, if you apply into UIUC for straight computer science in the engineering school, it's a 7.5% admin rate, but the computer science X programs are a 19.6% admin rate. So it's a little bit of a, I don't want to call it a hack, but like I feel like if and maybe to kind of give you a look at some of the different CS plus programs, CSX programs, if a student has a genuine interest in computer science plus econ or computer science plus philosophy, it's an ideal case for a student who's maybe not just pure computer science, who has other interests, and they can look to UIUC to combine those interests and create a college curriculum experience that really addresses what their educational goals and needs are. So I see this happening more and more across the United States at different universities that universities are doing to help sort of receive the larger influx of CS students that are coming their way. So, all right. Maybe a couple quick things when considering different majors. Don't randomly choose. I mean, this is where it's like we have a Rice and Brown admissions person on our advisory team, and he was telling me that like when they were reading apps for Rice one time, it's very obvious when there's a student who has a lot of like robotics, computer science, and then their declared major was Asian studies. And it's one of those things where like they automatically know that the application is it's disingenuous. Like they're not, it's a turnoff, right? So you can't just like go in one direction and then pick a major that is less applied for. So don't randomly choose. Admissions can detect majors that don't match. Um, and then think about like when you think about like crafting your like resume journey, your activity journey, think about how do you connect different activities that sort of paint a story. And so when volunteering with a climate NGO, working at a farmer's market, perhaps and potentially might equal to environmental science. And so maybe there's a couple examples here, but think about how your the interest in your particular activities, what type of story it paints, and how it might connect to a particular major that might fit you well. Um, Let me share another quick example here. And I'm again trying to race through so we can save time for questions. But um, hey, this is one of our students, student applying into computer science, 3.8 on weighted GPA, 1500 on the SAT, 11 APs. Not bad, obviously. And you can get a glimpse of their resume, three large leadership roles, won two fairly significant awards, both at the regional and state level with their Intel Science Fair, had a good internship, couple of research summer programs, and applied to these schools. Yellow is waitlisted, red is rejected, and green is admitted. And so this student admitted to Purdue and attending Purdue. By the way, fantastic choice to go to Purdue to study computer science, one of the best CS programs in the US. But this is sort of like, and I would this specific example is 2 years ago, and then to be frank with you, I think it has gotten even more tight. And with that being said, just to compare with you, one of our students who applied as an environmental science, 3.7 unweighted, 1480, maybe less robust resume, and overall like a decent student, but definitely one kind of solid step down from the computer science student. Admitted to Berkeley, admitted to UCI, UC Irvine, Santa Cruz, University of Washington, Boston University, and is attending UC Berkeley. And so major does matter, and it does impact the college list. And yeah, that's the truth. All right. Last trend that we're going to share is that colleges using early decisions. And this is something that I think this is not so much a trend that's sort of like emerging from 2023, 2024. It's a trend that has been going on, I would say, from 2020 up until now. And so just to give you a quick explanation of what is early decision. Early decision essentially is the program if you apply to a school that is using an early decision program and you are applying to that school under the ED program, if you are admitted, then you have to go. So maybe a couple of specific students may only apply to one college on an ED plan, so ED or ED2. The deadline is normally November and January for ED2. I can get into some of the specifics on maybe ED1 and ED2 on the Q&A, but essentially, um, if you apply under ED and you're admitted, you got to go. So, and then normally what happens is that either you're accepted, then you got to go. If you're deferred, students, like oftentimes schools will push the student at the early deadline to the regular deadline. And essentially what they're saying is that we'll just tell you later. We're going to decide at another time. And then, or they may reject that student at the early round, and students may not apply to that, to that school again under the regular deadline. So those are normally the three results that happen on an early decision. And why do colleges like ED? Number one, it takes the guesswork out of whether a student will come. So I mean, you can imagine like it's super confusing on the student and family side with regards to which schools you apply for and whether they'll let you in. And then on the university side, you can imagine you're getting all these students who are applying. If I admit you, how do I know you're going to come? And so colleges don't like the guesswork. And if they if a student who is applying in an early decision and they know that they're going to be coming, there is definitely a tendency or a veering towards wanting to admit more of those students because it's more of a sure thing for them. So colleges also want to accept students who want to attend. ED is the ultimate form of demonstrated interest. So the ED is the ultimate form of a student saying, "You're the school I want to be at. You're the school that I love, and I'm coming your way if you let me in." And colleges want to snag applicants who will meet their institutional priorities. I feel like this is an entire like this can't be underscored enough that oftentimes institutional priorities govern the admissions behavior of the university more than any other factor. And so whether, they want to admit more first generation students, more rural students or more students from certain states that don't send enough of those students, low income, underrepresented, whatever the case may be, um, oftentimes institutional priorities influence the behavior more than we think it does. And in so doing, oftentimes colleges admit some of those priorities, a lot of those priorities via early decision. All right. Maybe just as a quick chart, this is not so much for you to memorize the percent difference between on early decision versus regular decision for Duke, but just to kind of give you a quick visual that if you're applying early decision for certain schools, the admit rate can be significantly higher. I mean, if you look at a Tulane, which I think is kind of ridiculous, this was 2 years ago's data that Tulane has forthcoming made some adjustments to. But you can see that if you're applying under early decision, the admit rate is indeed higher. But I do want to make a note that like if you're like, a 2.5 student applying early decision to Northwestern, just because the higher, I'm just going to apply ED, expecting the ED is going to get me in. If you're a 2.5, likely you're just going to get rejected because you're so far out of the particular bracket that early decision is not going to help you. So you need to be within the bracket, and then ED can then be an advantage for you. I do want to share this because I think it's actually pretty important as well. And this essentially is the percent of the freshman class that the percent of freshman class schools are filling on the ED round. So between 2018 and 2022, schools are filling more of their freshman class on ED. So if you take a quick scan at Tulane from 28% to 68%, a WashU St. Louis from a 43 to 62, a Johns Hopkins even from a 46 to 60. So schools are filling their class on the ED round more and more. Now, I feel like that has leveled off a little bit, so it's not going to skyrocket to 80%. But what I'm saying is that this has been happening over the course of the last 5 or 6 years, more and more. And so the advantage of applying ED is ever more present in this chart. So all right. So who should apply early decision? Students who are done with standardized testing, so you don't need to take a test in the fall of your senior year to see what score you get before you apply to early decision, because most of the time ED deadline is November 1st. You're in a financial position to use the ED option because you will not see your financial aid package, especially this past year with the FAFSA fiasco, which we're not going to go into this coming presentation. But for certain, this past year you wouldn't. But in almost every other year, you're not going to see your financial package prior to getting the decision. So you should be sort of have some clarity on your financial position prior to submitting an ED application. Have a first choice college. So there's got to be a school that you really love and want to go to no matter what. And then you're also ideally at or above the 75th percentile for admits to college. And so ideally you're in the at least in the top third. This is the top 25%, but at least in the top third of the applicant pool. So that when using ED, it sort of like pushes you across the board, pushes you across the finish line, so to speak. And so if you're essentially, again, I use the kind of extreme example of the 2.5. If you're sort of farther out of the range, ED is like less and less of an advantage to you. And so the early pool is the most competitive pool, and students with less competitive profiles will likely not benefit from early decision. So you have to kind of look at where your bracket of school is, where your stats fit within that bracket, see which schools allow and take ED applications, and then consider your ED options from that point on. All right. And then so what do I do? So some things that you can consider doing is consider early decision if it's appropriate for you, which is including finances and fit, and then strategize on potentially using both ED1 and ED2. So oftentimes what we've done, especially when coaching our students on their college list, is that you can potentially use ED twice in a season. So ED1 is a November 1st deadline. ED2 normally is a January 1st deadline. And so what ends up happening is that you can apply to one school in ED1. You will hear the result on December 15th and then around December 15th. And let's just say, heaven forbid, you don't get into that school, you get rejected. You can consider applying early decision two to another school at the January 1st deadline. So I have a student who applied to Pomona College on ED1, was not admitted, unfortunately. Heard about it December 15th, was disappointed, took a day to grieve. And then the next day, we decided very quickly, we're going to do University of Chicago on ED2. And thankfully, was admitted to University of Chicago on ED2. So essentially, what you're doing is that you're giving yourself two shots, like two ED opportunities in one cycle and planning this out and thinking through which schools are a priority for you. This is also why we try to start the college list discussion very early on with our students and have ample time for strategy over the summer. And so that we can consider, and even if we decide that ED is not a good option for the family, that's totally fine. But it's good to think it through early, and then develop a plan that you can execute over the course of the fall. So, all right. All right, so trends for 2023, application numbers are up, college majors matter, no question, and then colleges are using early decision. I want to maybe a couple of things to don't forget, apply to more safety schools, build a major focus resume, consider ED if it's right for you. And I do want to harken back to my story from the beginning is that it's okay to change plans. And so don't feel like you got to get everything right. And oftentimes, students will change their minds on majors, and you won't necessarily know until you get there. So make the best choice you can, and it's right and life to make some adjustments along the way. So no worries whatsoever. I do want to like leave you with a couple of considerations. And I realized when I did this slide that this could be its own presentation, but we see a lot of students, we see a lot of resumes, and it's easy to see when somebody is building a resume sort of artificially. And so I know I mentioned earlier, build a resume that really fits with the major. But if students are genuinely pursuing their interest and really doing things that bring them joy, and they have some demonstrated level of aptitude and ability in that area, that's great. Then continue going down that route, and your resume will reflect you in a very genuine way. So I oftentimes tell students, focus on your real interest and also focus on genuinely helping people. And I say that because I think sometimes there's always I see a lot of projects. I see a lot of things on paper. And the reality is that like oftentimes there's a pursuit to build a resume. But let me encourage you to pursue to genuinely help people. Number one, it's more fulfilling and more purposeful. Number two, I do want to say that if you end up getting a letter of rec from the people you help, that letter of rec is going to be more genuine. So I don't, I know I kind of backdoored that next point here, but um, um, the pursue your real interests and then focus on genuinely helping people. The letters of rec portion, as I mentioned already, are going to matter more. And so this is where when you get a lot of students with a lot of inflated resumes and applications, um, admissions officers are going to rely more on rec letters to really differentiate between one student and the next. So be genuine, help people. Do so in the classroom as well, and your teachers will will see it, right? And so focus in on the real things, and your rec letters will be better. That's a byproduct of that. Demonstrating interest. This term demonstrating interest essentially in a nutshell means that it is things that you do to demonstrate your interest to that particular college. Not every school measures demonstrating interest, and Stanford doesn't measure demonstrating interest. Harvard, Yale, don't worry about the Ivy Leagues. But many other schools, whether in small or large measure, is measuring demonstrating interest. So that includes visiting a school, jumping into an online information session, visiting an admissions rep at a college fair. Those are examples of demonstrating interest. And so let me encourage you that it may be helpful to demonstrate your interest towards your target and safety schools. And so this is where, again, when you're talking about like University of, a University of Washington, which generally speaking is not measuring demonstrated interest, but when you're thinking about schools that you thought would be more likely to admit you, their applicant pools are ballooning, and they also have to differentiate which students are more likely to come. So let me encourage you to maybe consider demonstrating some of that interest towards your safety and target schools. And that may invariably help you focus down your list a little bit more, because you cannot demonstrate interest to 50 schools. You have to really understand which schools are your priorities and then focus on where you do that. All right. I want to make sure there is enough time for questions. So I'm going to invite Anthony back in and appreciate all of you hanging on with me through all of our information. But Anthony, do we have any questions, or are we're just
Yeah.
going to sign off? What do you think?
No, we have a ton of questions, and I'm sure now that we've
Okay.
gotten the Q&A,
All right.
everyone can ask more now. So,
All
um,
right.
a question regarding, I guess this is the part when you were talking about admit rates within the UC system, and you're looking at a place like UW. The question around CSU, if we think that admit rates are likely to fall for places like Cal Poly, San Jose State, San Diego State.
Yeah, that data is out there actually for like more impacted majors, like and so but a Cal Poly, what's kind of different about a Cal Poly is that like it's just become a popular school, and rightfully so. I mean, there's a lot of Cal Poly alumni coming back into Silicon Valley. They're easy to hire. There's a good track record for Cal Poly grads. So I mean, specifically a Cal Poly is going to be more difficult to get into over time. There's no question. So that admit rate has dropped for sure. And if you talk about computer science, that admit rate has dropped like a rock, even more so. At San Jose State, because I can imagine, this is a Bay Area person asking the question, but the CS major has always been impacted at San Jose State. And so there's no question that the like specifically the majors, maybe the school as a whole, maybe the overall admit rate, maybe not dropping like a rock, but the CS program for certain within these schools are dropping. No question.
Sounds good. A question around ED1 and ED2, since I think most of the stats that we presented won't disaggregate between early decision one and early decision two.
Hmm.
But there was just a question of, what we would think the admit rate would be there. And if we think, I think this is another thing of like more schools are doing ED2 now. So how critical is ED2 in kind of an early decision plan?
There is, if the question is asking, is there a difference between a percentage ebb and rate for 81 and 82? That data is not out there. So I mean, we can make flamboyant guesses about what that might be. I'm happy to make some flamboyant guesses offline, but that data is actually not out there. So I don't want to overstate it. But how important is it to have both an 81 and 82 strategy? I think it's helpful to think about it. So I feel like if among the things that students have like in their power, it's the early decision choice. Like that's the one thing that like you have in your hand. And so being able to employ it as many times as you can, again, provided that you have financial and academic fit with a school, like I think if you can use it twice, you should use it twice, and give it your best shot. So yeah.
And then another question about, since we talked a lot around kind of picking the right major, I think this question was specifically about wanting to go towards an undergraduate business program, but wanting to pick something more specific like entrepreneurship, and wondering if that is actually an advantage since it's more specific, or if potentially that is still would be impacted for um, that type of program.
Yeah, it's a great question. It actually depends on the school you're applying to. So, for example, like what makes most business majors, like I would say, like let's just an example would be like a Haas School of Business at UC Berkeley, or a Tepper School of Business at Carnegie Mellon, right? So this is where it's like these schools have proper undergraduate business schools. And then under the rubric of the business school, there may be like a general business major, an entrepreneurship major, a marketing major, or a finance major. So if you're applying to a business major that's under still the rubric of the undergraduate business school, normally the admin rates are not that different. And so I wouldn't like, oh, I'm just, doing entrepreneurship. Hopefully it's a much higher admin rate. Um, if that's not the case and it's not within like Haas School of Business and you're just applying into the like College of Arts and Sciences or Letters and Sciences in the UC system, and there are other business like related majors, then I wouldn't say that like the admit rate is going to be much higher, but it's likely that the admit rate is not the same and not as selective. So.
We didn't touch on early action, but I guess there's a question of like how we think early action fits into these trends, and if students should probably apply to more schools in that direction.
Yeah, early action data has not changed that much, or in the sense of like your likelihood of being admitted. So even like 10 years ago, early action, I mean, there may be some outlier individual schools that have like really high early action admit rates, but it's very much an outlier. And so most of the time, early action is not a significant benefit to a student's admit chances. But for me personally, I like my students to apply to as many early deadline schools as possible. In part, in large part, because you get some of your results early, even on your safety schools, you get some of those results early in December. You get into a few schools on the early round, you feel good. And I tell you, man, like managing the emotional and mental battle throughout the college admissions process is super important. I mean, it's not, I don't mean to make a lot of it. It's super important. So that's why I really try to encourage students apply to safety schools on the early round, even on the early action round, so that it's not binding. Get the result early, have a few schools in your back pocket, and just go into like your winter Christmas break feeling a little bit better. And so that's normally what I would do with an EA early action as it relates to an ED.
A question around demonstrated interest. Since we were talking about like that being a little bit more important, the question was basically what can the students do for public schools or schools that have said they won't consider demonstrated interest.
Yeah, for the schools that say they don't consider demonstrating interest, and then maybe the way to find this out is that you can search the school's common data set. So if you just search the Cornell common data set, you'll get a chart that describes what they measure in an application review, and they will list off whether they are measuring a student's interest in that school. And so there's going to be a lot of schools that say they don't. And so you have to take their word for it when they say that they don't. Um, but maybe this is one of these kind of flamboyant discussions or guesses. It's not a guess so much as to say that the environment is also challenging for colleges to understand how to build their class. So when every university's pool is getting bigger, it makes it more difficult for them to predict how that pool will respond when they admit them. And so I'm not saying any one particular school is measuring a lot more than the other. This is not that webinar, but I'm very confident that a lot of schools are paying attention. Now, are they paying attention a little bit? Are they paying attention a lot? That depends on the school, but schools are paying attention.
I'll do one last question just about the kind of acceptance rate via major. Just the parent was basically asking if there's a resource that we could offer for that. I don't believe that that's available for every school. Was there a place, Elton, that you would recommend for checking that out?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Uh,
The sound actually blanked out on me, so I kind of
Got it.
missed the first few seconds of that.
You're all
Can you
good.
repeat
The
it? Yeah.
question was around like, is there a central place that we can look for acceptance rate by major?
Oh, there is no central place, like unfortunately. And then UC system is a little bit more transparent. Not every school is transparent, so like you can actually search common data set, and even on collegedata.com, which houses hopefully the most updated common data set for every university, there is some admin rate data there, but there is not a great central place for it. And I know because we tried building something, and it's actually way more difficult than it seems. And then on top of the fact that if you're looking at average data, national average data is super unhelpful. So you have to look at school-specific admit rate data. So, for example, your specific high school, um, a lot of schools are using platforms like Naviance or Score. You need to go onto the Naviance or Score platform of your particular high school, look at, say, what's the admit rate for University of Virginia for my particular school, and then compare that admit, like take a look at the percent of students from that high school being admitted to that school, and throughout the national admit rate. And so look for your school specific admit rate. That's the most important.
Yeah. Okay. That's all we got time for today. There are still tons and tons of questions. I'm sorry we can't get to everything, but please definitely, if you have any other questions or if you want to bug us on a particular topic that you want a webinar about, please scan the free consultation. Just let us know like what you want to hear more about or yeah, anything that you're curious about kind of this process for some of our upcoming students. So.
Anthony, is there one more really provocative question that's on there?
All right. Well, you want provocative? Okay. Ready? I've heard. So this is a question around early action, they're likely hinting at restricted early action. I've heard that for IVs, one shouldn't do early action, especially when there's early decision, given that it is seemingly reserved for athletes, legacy, other special cases, referring to the early action. So do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, I had a line in there that says institutional priorities drive the admissions behavior more than anything else. So let me emphasize that it is yeah, that's where it's at. So I mean, I don't want to profile the audience, Anthony.
And
Um,
can you clarify
but
institutional priorities just in case people don't?
yeah. So every year, and those institutional priorities will also change, by the way, on a year-to-year basis. But a university may set a priority to admit more first-generation students, more students from like states that they get fewer applicants from, like a North Dakota or a South Dakota. Um, whatever. It may. There definitely are legacy and athletes all in there as well. So this is where, yeah, those priorities oftentimes are heavily weighted in the early rounds.
Mhm.
On an REA or an EA, Even though I feel like for CP schools, apply to as many EA schools as you can, even on an early run. I still feel like get it in early and get the results early. But yes, for like a Stanford REA or a Harvard REA, yeah, it's not gonna matter much.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone.
Provocative.
Okay. Not too provocative.
Not too provocative. Um,
Well, I guess final question, will recording be available? Yes, I will down I'll be able to send it all out to everyone. I think I have everyone's email who joined. We'll be sending out a recording so you can come back, look at the slides if there was something that you wanted to look at, or look at the sources, things like that. So
all right. Hey, super thanks everyone for hanging out with us this evening, whether you're on the East Coast, international, or even on the West Coast. And excited to have you join us for the next one. We have a more webinars coming up with more super helpful information. But reach out anytime, free consultation on the scan, and you'll get to meet Anthony, and that'll be well worth it. All right. Good night, everybody. Take care. Many
thanks, everyone.
thanks.
Night.
Yep.